Now, if you follow my channel on a regular basis, you know as well as plumbing and gas, I'm also massively into my history. Now, today I've travelled just over 2 hours to Leicester for our annual general meeting for our LCL awards, who are my governing body for all the exams and stuff I do for the plumbing and gas. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity because today we're at the National Space Museum in Leicester, and we're going to be here all day. So behind me there is a 42-metre rocket tower, so I'll be looking forward to seeing what's in that. So let's get on with it, get this meeting finished, because I believe some part of the day today we're going for a tour around. The National Space Centre is a museum and educational resource covering the fields of space science and astronomy, along with space research programme in partnership with the University of Leicester. It was opened on the 30th of June 2001 and employs 189 people. The National Space Centre has over 400 spaces in the car park, including 23 disabled spaces, all charged at £4 per day on pay and display. Before we even get inside the centre, there are 3 exhibits outside. This is a granite parachute jig made for the UK's Beagle 2 mission to Mars. The parachute was carefully folded into a storage pack and then shaped inside the piece on your left. The second granite piece was placed on top, sandwiching the packed parachute and compressing it down to the correct size and shape to fit inside the spacecraft. Beagle 2 was part of the European Space Agency's 2003 Mars Express mission. It was conceived by a group of British academics headed by Professor Colin Pillinger. The lander's operational control centre was located right here at the National Space Centre. Next, we come to this satellite launch catapult. This U-shaped cradle was made to hold the Intelsat satellite inside the cargo bay of the space shuttle Atlantis. Once in space, the shuttle could open the cargo bay doors and deploy the satellites into orbit. A mechanism at the top of the cradle was designed to flick the satellite, causing it to spin as it was released into space. A bit like a catapult, the spinning motion helped keep the satellite stable and in orbit of the Earth. The cradle was scheduled to be launched aboard Atlantis in 1987. However, after the Challenger disaster in 1986, the entire space shuttle fleet was grounded. By the time the shuttle returned to fly, NASA had abandoned commercial satellite launches. Intelsat V1F1 was redesigned and launched in 1991 aboard the Ariane 4 rocket without the need for the Space Launch Catapult. Just to the right of the cradle is a Pioneer statue. This statue by Aidan Haynes was commissioned to mark the centre's 10th anniversary in 2011. On the 3rd of June 1965, Ed White became the first American to conduct a spacewalk, 3 months after Alexei Leonov had achieved the feat for the Soviet Union. He used a handheld propulsion unit and a tether to move around the outside of Gemini 4 space capsule as it travelled around the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour. He returned home a hero. Sadly, 18 months later, Ed White and his colleagues Virgil Gus Grissom and Roger Chaffee died in a fire on the launch pad whilst training for the Apollo 1 mission. So that's what we've got outside in the car park. Let's get inside and find out exactly what's in this tower. This semi-translucent tower, which is clad in high-tech ethylene tetrafluoroethylene or ETFE pillows, was designed especially to house the centre's largest attractions. The iconic rocket tower is home to the Blue Streak and the THOR Able rockets. On the 30th of June 2001, former NASA astronaut Jeffrey H. Hoffman opened the Space Center officially to the general public. In its first 5 months, the National Space Center received 165,000 visitors, 25% ahead of its targets, and was named Museum of the Year in 2002. On the 26th of January 2012, Sir Patrick Moore visited the National Space Centre to launch the planetarium, which was newly renamed in his honour. He also launched a new planetarium show, Tour of the Night Sky, that included a series of best-of clips hosted by Sir Patrick Moore himself. In June 2005, Apollo 11 astronaut and the second man on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, visited the National Space Centre. He spoke to the children and toured all the exhibits. The entrance fee is £20.95 for adults over 16. Children are $18.95 and under 5s are free. Now, LCL had hired out the boosters' picnic area for the day, so it was closed to the general public, and it's situated at the bottom of the rocket tower. Now, I was one of the first to arrive just as the sponsors were setting up their tables, so I managed to get the rockets all to myself. Look at that, just magnificent. Now, one of today's sponsors was old friends. So it was Rebecca Cox and Mark Prescott from Kane. Now we'll get to see more of the two rockets later on when I take a tour around the place. But first of all, it would be rude not to have a coffee in one of these special cups. Now, just before the forum was starting, this happened.
Stage actuators locked in. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, ignition.
Will begin in 5 minutes.
So that's the morning session's over. Time to have some lunch and obviously some nice pudding, and then we can get stuck into having a walk around this place and see what it has to offer. So as you walk into the entrance, you're greeted with the cafe on the left hand side, some space vehicles hanging from the ceiling. This is where you'll also find the shop and the toilets. As the sign says, let's get on with it and start this journey. Now, this first exhibit we're greeted by, which is hanging from the ceiling, is actually the Soyuz capsule, which is a Russian manned spacecraft, and they are the longest serving manned spacecraft in history. Now, directly across from us is the Patrick Moore Planetarium, but sadly we can't film in there, and also one of only 2 Gemini tow test vehicles hanging from the ceiling. Next, directly under the Gemini TTV2, there is a case full of spacesuits. So let's check them out. This first suit is a T-38 flight suit and helmet worn by British-born astronaut Piers Sellers during training and preparation for his 3 space shuttle missions. Now, next to Piers' flight suit is the so-called KV-2 rescue spacesuit. This was worn by the first British European Space Agency astronaut, Tim Peake. Tim wore this spacesuit as he launched to the International Space Station in 2015. Next to Tim's suit is an Apollo constant wear garment, which is actually Buzz Aldrin's, and he wore this garment during training for the Apollo 11 mission. It is identical to the one he wore under his spacesuit during his journey to the moon. Now, next to Buzz's underwear is actually a film costume. Now, this is an EVA spacesuit from the film The Martian. Matt Damon wore this spacesuit during the filming of Ridley Scott's sci-fi survival movie The Martian. It is an extravehicular activity on an EVA spacesuit based on the EMU spacesuit NASA used on the International Space Station. Costume designer Yanti Yates worked with NASA engineers and the film arts department to approve the final design. It depicts a serious attempt to imagine what future Martian spacesuits might look like. And finally, this orange suit is a Foral Hydro suit. Alexander Polshuk took this Foral Hydro suit into space with him during the Soyuz TM-16 mission to the Mir space station in 1993. It is a waterproof suit designed to float in case of landing in water. It has a self-inflating collar like those used on aeroplanes, with a mouthpiece and tube in case extra inflation is needed. The suit has a light beacon and a distress signal device laced into the waist. The National Space Centre has 6 main galleries. The Welcome Hall, which we've just walked through. The Universe. This gallery covers the formation of the universe, how humans observed it, and the search for alien life. Into Space, which is a gallery dedicated to spaceflight, which includes a mock-up of the Columbus module from the International Space Station and the space toilet. Next we have our solar system. As the name suggests, the planets of the solar system are the subject of this gallery, which includes the Tinitarium, the planetarium, especially for the very young visitors. Home planet, and again as the name suggests, it is a gallery with the planet Earth as its subject. It looks at how it is observed and how it has changed and the consequences the human actions have caused. Space Oddities. This is an area where a selection of artifacts from the National Space Centre's collection are exhibited. The gallery is updated on a regular basis by the creator in order to display lesser known objects with unique histories. Live Space. Live Space is an area where talks, live link-ups, news from space and science demonstrations are presented. The Sir Patrick Moore Planetarium, which is a full dome planetarium which is used to project a variety of immersive shows, many of which are created by the NSC Creative, who are based at the National Space Centre. The planetarium has 192 seats and 6 accessible spaces. TetraStar Spaceport. Launched in 2022, this is a simulated low Earth orbit cruise on board a spacecraft. And finally, the Rocket Tower. The tower features stories from the space race. It has 2 upright rockets which it was specially designed for, a PGM-17 THOR Able and a blue streak. The Rocket Tower also displays a piece of moon rock. This is the Orion DMA EVA spacesuit. This is a semi-rigid one-piece spacesuit built and designed by MPP. They have been used for spacewalks in the Russian space program, which was the successor to the Soviet space program, and by space programs of other countries including the American NASA. Now for me, this is a very interesting spacesuit, and one I am absolutely ashamed to say I knew nothing about until going to the National Space Centre. This is Helen Sharman's spacesuit, and Helen was the first UK citizen to go into space. Whilst driving home from her job at Mars, the confectionery company, in June 1989, Helen heard an advert on a radio station asking for astronauts. There was 13,000 applicants for the one post, and Helen was the one who was successful. Having undergone 18 months of rigorous physical, mental and logistics training, Helen was selected as a prime astronaut. On the 18th of May 1991, she blasted off into space aboard the Soyuz spacecraft to become the first British astronaut to leave the planet. Helen spent 7 days, 21 hours and 30 minutes in space. This is a selection of the foods that Helen would have probably have eaten while she was being wined and dined by the Russians in space. And it wouldn't be a Tomcat gas training video without looking at plumbing and gas, so here's the toilets they use in space. This is a Russian space station toilet made for the Mir station. A space toilet or a zero-gravity toilet is a toilet that can be used in a weightless environment. In the absence of weight, the collection and retention of liquid and solid waste is directed by use of airflow. Since the air used to direct the waste is returned to the cabin, it is filtered beforehand to control odour and cleanliness of bacteria. In older systems, wastewater is vented into space and any solids are compressed and stored for removal upon landing. More modern systems expose solid waste to vacuum pressure to kill bacteria, which prevents odour problems and kills pathogens. Now that's all the exhibits on this ground floor. Let's take this staircase, walk along the mezzanine and find out what's in the rocket tower. Now we're on the mezzanine, we get a better view of the Gemini TTV and the Soyuz capsule. This full-scale manned test vehicle, or TTV-2, was built to train Gemini astronauts for flight. It served as a second of two TTVs used to perform maneuvering control and landing techniques. It was towed aloft by a helicopter and then landed several times on a dry lake bed in Edwards Air Force Base in California. The capsule had a kite-shaped flexible wing attached, allowing the pilot to fly it to a controlled landing. The Gemini TTV-2 here was flown by test pilot Jack Swaggart. His selection as an astronaut was owed in part to his bravery and skill he demonstrated in the TTV-2. He later achieved fame as the command module pilot on the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission. The Soyuz capsule is designed to carry a 3-astronaut crew in low Earth orbit. Spacecraft similar to these are used to ferry astronauts to and from the International Space Station. The spacecraft is built into 3 modules. The center part is called the return module. This is where the astronauts sit for launch and landing. There are 3 couches inside. It is extremely cramped. This is the only part of the spacecraft that comes back to Earth. The other 2 modules are left to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. The spherical part at the front is called the orbital module. Once the spacecraft is in orbit, the crew can crawl into the module to give themselves a bit more room. All the equipment that the crew needs to be comfortable on their journey is in here. The air purifying unit, the food supplies, and of course, the toilet. And finally, the back part of the capsule is called the service module. The electronics and the fuel tanks for the propulsion system are held in here. Now the first room we come to is the floor just above the booster picnic area. The silver rocket on the left hand side is the Blue Streak rocket. In 1961, the UK, France, Germany and Italy decided to develop their own satellite launch vehicle known as Europa. Blue Streak was used as the first staged and performed faultlessly. Problems with the other 2 stages, however, doomed the project to failure. Here you can see the top of Blue Streak's liquid oxygen tank. The tank's steel walls are not much thicker than the metal in a can of pop. The white rocket is called THOR Able and it is a 2-stage rocket. The bulky lower stage THOR and a slender upper stage Able. In 1958, 3 THOR Able rockets were launched with lone mice in their nose cones. The first rocket exploded, killing its tiny passenger, nicknamed Minnie Mouse. 2 successful launches followed, and electronic monitoring confirmed that the mice survived their journey into space. Sadly, the mice were never recovered due to difficulties locating the nose cones. And finally, let's finish off with a look at the view you get over Leicester from the top of the rocket tower. Now that's the end of LCL Awards AGM or Forum here at the National Space Centre in Leicester. So hopefully you've liked the video and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.